As Michael Jordan stood alone in the neglected room 2323 of the hotel he secretly owned, rain pouring down outside, while a young boy named Zach clutched a worn basketball covered in hospital messages nearby, he realized this wasn't just about fixing broken walls or exposing betrayal. It was about honoring the promise he once made to his late father to create a place where ordinary people, struggling families, and brave kids fighting for their lives would finally feel truly seen, valued, and never turned away again. Michael Jordan stepped out of the cab and into a wall of cold rain that hammered down without mercy. The wind whipped around him as he grabbed his simple duffel bag and headed for the glowing entrance of the Sky View Grand Hotel. His body ached from the long flight, but his mind was clear. He hadn't told anyone he was coming, not the managers, not the staff, nobody. This was his hotel now, bought 3 months ago, but tonight he wanted to walk in like any regular guy off the street. No red carpet, no special treatment, just the honest truth of how this place treated everyday people. After everything he'd been through in life, he needed to see it for himself. The lobby hit him with a rush of warm air and soft light. Chandeliers sparkled overhead, marble floors gleamed underfoot, and the employees moved around in sharp, clean uniforms. For a second, it all looked like the kind of place that could make a tired traveler feel welcome. But Michael had always noticed the little things others let slide. He saw the yellowish water stains spreading across the ceiling like old bruises, a worn chair in the corner balanced on a folded piece of cardboard to stop it from wobbling, and an elderly housekeeper quietly mopping up puddles of rainwater that kept dripping from a leak somewhere above. She worked without complaint, her shoulders hunched against the ache of another long night. The hotel's beauty was real, but it was only skin deep, like a tired smile hiding exhaustion underneath. It made something tighten in Michael's chest. This was the place he'd hoped could live up to bigger dreams, but right now, it felt like it was barely holding on. He walked up to the front desk, water still dripping from his jacket onto the polished floor. The woman working there, Eliza Thornton, looked up with the polite but worn-out expression of someone who'd already handled too many problems that day. She typed on her computer, frowned, and shook her head. "I'm sorry, sir. There's no reservation under Michael Jordan, and I'm afraid we're completely booked tonight. No rooms available." Michael stood still for a moment, letting the words sink in. He knew better. Before boarding the plane, he'd pulled up the latest occupancy report himself. Nearly half the hotel should have been empty. Families could have been resting here instead of wandering around in this storm. He spoke calmly, his voice low and even. "I own this hotel. I just need a room. Any room." Eliza blinked, then gave him the kind of sympathetic but doubtful look people reserve for guests who are exhausted and starting to imagine things. She probably thought he was just another tired traveler, spinning a story after a bad flight. "Sir, I wish I could help, but I'm not asking for the finest suite in the building," Michael said, looking her straight in the eyes. There was no anger in his voice, just a quiet weight that came from years of seeing what really mattered. "I'm asking why a hotel with empty rooms is turning away the person standing in front of you." Eliza paused, her fingers resting on the keyboard. For a brief second, something like real tiredness, and maybe a flicker of guilt, crossed her face. She glanced around quickly before answering. "I'm only permitted to trust what appears on this screen, sir, and right now the screen says, 'I cannot help you.'" Her words sounded practiced, like she'd said them too many times before, but there was a heaviness behind them, the kind that comes from someone who doesn't like the rules she's forced to follow. Michael nodded slowly, feeling the rain still clinging to his skin and the deeper chill of disappointment settling in. This wasn't how he wanted his first night here to go. As he turned slightly toward the lobby, one of the security cameras mounted on the wall suddenly shifted, tilting away just as his eyes met it. It wasn't a random movement. It felt deliberate, like someone was watching and didn't want to be watched back. A quiet unease settled over him. The missing reservation and the full hotel story might not be a simple computer glitch after all. Something more was happening behind these walls, and standing there soaked and unnoticed in his own hotel, Michael knew he wasn't going to walk away until he figured it out. Michael sat in a quiet corner of the lobby, still damp from the rain, and thinking about the strange way the night was unfolding. The front desk had finally found him a room after some back and forth, but the whole situation left a heavy feeling in his gut. He wasn't ready to head upstairs yet. As he watched guests move through the space, a small voice cut through the low hum of the lobby. "Are you Michael Jordan?" A 12-year-old boy stood a few feet away, eyes wide with pure surprise and joy. The kid wore an old, faded Chicago Bulls cap that looked like it had been through 100 games, and he clutched a worn basketball tight against his chest like it was the most precious thing he owned. The boy's name was Zach Miller. His face lit up in a way that made the tiredness in Michael's shoulders ease just a little. Zach had been through a brutal year. Treatments for a serious heart condition that kept him in and out of hospitals, hooked up to machines, surrounded by beeps and worried faces. This trip to Chicago was his family's first real chance to celebrate his birthday after all those months of fear and uncertainty. They had saved up just to give him something normal, something happy. Seeing Michael here in the same hotel felt like a miracle to the boy. Zach stepped closer, a shy but hopeful smile on his face. "Mr. Jordan, would you sign my basketball? Please, it's okay if you're busy." Michael reached out and took the ball gently. As soon as it was in his hands, he felt the weight of more than just leather and air. The entire surface was covered in handwritten messages, notes from doctors who cheered him on, nurses who stayed late, relatives who prayed, and kids from the hospital ward who shared the same scary journey. Each word was a reminder of love, struggle, and quiet strength. It hit Michael harder than he expected. This wasn't just a ball, it was a record of a boy's fight to stay alive. "I don't want to be famous like you," Zach said softly, his fingers tracing one of the messages. "I don't need to make the winning shot or hear the crowd cheer. I just want to be strong enough to run through a whole basketball game without the heart monitor going off, without everyone stopping to check if I'm okay." His voice cracked a little, but he kept going, eyes shining with determination mixed with the fear he'd carried for so long. Michael looked at the boy for a long moment, the lobby noise fading into the background. He thought about his own father, the long drives, the simple dreams, and all the times life tested him. "Some victories never happen in front of a crowd," he said, his voice warm and steady. "The fact that you're standing here tonight, after everything you've been through, means you've already won one. And that's the kind that matters most." Zach's eyes filled with tears, but they were the good kind, the kind that come when someone finally sees you. He hugged the signed basketball close to his chest like it was a new piece of armor. In that quiet moment, something shifted inside Michael. He had planned to step forward, tell everyone who he really was, and fix things the fast way. But watching Zach hold that ball, thinking about the families turned away at the desk and the tired workers trying their best, Michael changed his mind. He wouldn't reveal that he owned the hotel, not yet. Instead, he would stay as just another guest and find out how ordinary people were truly being treated here, good and bad. Because if he was going to make this place right, he needed to understand the real story first, one honest moment at a time. Michael was still thinking about Zach when the manager finally showed up. Damon Wells came rushing across the lobby in a sharp suit, flashing a big professional smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm so sorry for the mix-up, sir," he said smoothly. "It looks like a room has opened up after all." Just like that, a room was suddenly available. Michael wasn't surprised. He had a feeling this kind of miracle only happened when someone important was watching. Damon offered him the biggest suite in the hotel, the kind with all the fancy extras, but Michael shook his head. "No, thank you. Just give me a standard room, the kind any regular guest would get." Damon looked confused for a second, but he handed over the key anyway. Room 2323. The number hit Michael right in the chest. It was the same number that had defined so much of his life on the court. Tonight, it felt like more than a coincidence. He rode the elevator up to the 23rd floor, the quiet hum of the building around him. When he stepped off and walked down the hallway, he saw a housekeeper hurrying inside the room he'd been given. She was moving fast, wiping down surfaces and straightening things with tired but careful hands. Her name tag read, Sophia. Michael waited a respectful moment before stepping in. "Thank you, Sophia," he said gently. "I appreciate you getting this ready." Sophia froze for a second, then turned around slowly. When he said her name, her eyes filled with tears. She tried hard to hold back. She had been at the Skyview Grand for almost 10 years, working hard every day. Lately, she was pulling second shifts in a row because several other employees had been let go. No one ever called her by name unless something was wrong. A dirty towel, a missed spot, a complaint. Hearing Michael say it with simple kindness nearly broke her. She wiped her hands on her apron and gave him a small, shaky smile. "It's no trouble, sir. I just wanted to make sure it was ready for you." The room looked clean on the surface, but Michael could see the truth underneath. The air conditioner rattled but blew no cool air, leaving the space stuffy and damp. Dark spots of moisture crept under the wallpaper like hidden scars. The television flickered weakly, barely able to hold a picture, and when he walked to the window, instead of the sparkling Chicago skyline the hotel website promised, he saw nothing but a dirty brick wall. The online photos had clearly been edited to make everything look brighter, newer, and more inviting. This was what regular guests paid for, a room that felt neglected and disappointing after the fancy lobby downstairs. It made Michael's heart ache for the families who saved up for a special stay only to get this. Sophia lingered for a moment, gathering her cleaning supplies. "People here only remember our names when something isn't clean enough," she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of years of being overlooked. There was no bitterness, just a deep tiredness and quiet acceptance. Michael looked at her with real respect. "From tonight on, at least one person will remember how hard you tried." His words were simple, but they landed softly, like a promise. Sophia nodded, blinking back fresh tears before slipping out the door. Later that night, as Michael tried to settle in, he noticed the air vent was loose. He reached up to check it and pulled out a folded piece of paper tucked inside. It was a maintenance note, written in clear, urgent handwriting. "Do not repair any rooms on floor 23 without authorization from Mr. Wells." Michael stared at the paper for a long time, the room's stale air pressing in around him. The problems here weren't accidents. Someone was keeping things broken on purpose, and he was standing right in the middle of it. Michael sat on the edge of the bed in room 2323, the worn mattress dipping under his weight. The faint smell of dampness lingered in the air, but it was the room number that pulled him back in time. 2323. It opened a flood of memories about his father, James Jordan. Years ago, his dad would save money for months, skipping small comforts, working extra hours, just so he could spend one single night at the Skyview Grand whenever he came to Chicago to watch Michael play. To James, this hotel was never about fancy sheets or big views. It was proof that an ordinary working man, someone who got his hands dirty every day, could walk into a grand place and still be treated with real dignity and respect. That idea meant everything to him. Michael closed his eyes and could almost hear his father's voice. In their last visit together, they had stood by a hotel window overlooking the glowing city lights. James placed a hand on his son's shoulder and spoke with quiet wisdom. "An expensive room doesn't make a person important," he said. "The way they are welcomed does. The way someone looks you in the eye and makes you feel like you belong." Young Michael had listened closely, his heart full of fire and promise. "Someday, I'll build a place where you won't have to save all year just to walk through the door, Dad. I'll make sure people like you feel important every single night." That promise stayed with Michael long after his father was gone. It lived in his chest like a quiet fire that never went out. Buying the Sky View Grand wasn't just another business deal or smart investment. It was personal. It was his way of finishing what he started with the man who raised him, the man who taught him that hard work and heart mattered more than anything. He wanted to create a place where families wouldn't have to scrape together every penny for basic kindness, where housekeepers like Sophia were seen and valued, and where kids like Zach could feel safe and celebrated. But sitting here now in this neglected room, Michael felt the weight of how far things had slipped. He thought about the previous owner too. Vernon Pike had been an older player on Michael's high school basketball team. Vernon was talented, but life hadn't gone the way he dreamed. Deep down, he always believed Michael had stolen the spotlight and the future that should have been his. When Vernon finally sold the hotel, he made one strict condition. Michael's ownership had to stay secret for a full year. Michael agreed because he thought it was about protecting Vernon's pride, letting him step away without losing face in front of the city. He had no idea that secrecy was part of a bigger trap, something darker waiting to unfold. The realization hit Michael slowly but hard as he stared at the cracked wall and the useless air conditioner. Someone wasn't just damaging a hotel through neglect and shortcuts. They were taking the promise he made to his father, the most personal thing he carried, and turning it into a cruel humiliation. Every leaking ceiling, every turned-away guest, every overlooked worker felt like a direct slap to the memory of James Jordan. Michael's jaw tightened with a mix of sadness and growing anger. He owed it to his dad, to Zach, to Sophia, and to everyone else struggling here to make this right. This wasn't just about fixing rooms anymore. It was about honoring a promise that still lived in his heart. Michael woke up early the next morning, the events of the night before still weighing on him. He found Damon Wells in the lobby and pulled him aside for a quiet talk. "I'd like to speak with Marcus Washington, the general manager," Michael said calmly. Damon's face stayed smooth and professional, but something flickered behind his eyes. "Marcus Washington? I'm sorry, sir, but I've never heard that name. No one by that title works here." The lie landed heavy in the air. Michael kept his expression even, but inside, warning bells were going off. He had personally chosen Marcus after buying the hotel, someone honest and capable who cared about doing things right. Right then, his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a message from Marcus. Michael stepped away to read it, his stomach tightening with every word. Marcus explained that he had been tricked into attending an emergency board meeting that never existed. While he was gone, his access to all the hotel systems was wiped, and his name was completely erased from the staff directory. It was like he had never been there at all. Someone had planned this carefully, pushing out the one person Michael trusted to run the place. The betrayal felt personal, like another piece of his promise to his father was being quietly torn apart. Michael returned to Damon with fresh questions. What about the blocked rooms? Why are so many listed as unavailable when they clearly aren't? Damon shrugged, keeping his voice smooth. Just a technical malfunction, sir. These things happen in old buildings. But when Michael pressed him about why the problem seemed to focus mostly on floors that were supposed to be getting renovated, Damon stumbled over his words and couldn't give a straight answer. His eyes shifted, avoiding Michael's gaze. It was clear now. Damon knew a lot more than he was saying. This wasn't confusion or bad luck. It was something deliberate, and Michael could feel the walls of the hotel closing in with secrets. After Damon walked away, pretending to check on something important, Eliza approached Michael from behind the front desk. She looked nervous, glancing around to make sure no one was watching. Without a word, she slipped him a folded piece of paper, a handwritten occupancy report that showed the real numbers. Dozens of rooms were actually available. "We've been ordered to follow a secret do not sell list," she whispered, her voice shaking. "If anyone breaks the rules and tells the truth, they get fired on the spot. No questions asked." Her eyes filled with tears as she continued. Her mother was fighting a serious illness, and the treatments were expensive. Eliza couldn't risk losing this job, even if it meant turning families away into the cold. She had hated sending Michael away the night before, but fear had won. "I know I treated you unfairly," Eliza said, her voice barely above a whisper and full of regret. "But some people can't afford to lose their jobs just because they tell the truth." Michael looked at her with understanding, not judgment. He saw a good person trapped in a bad situation. "Fear doesn't make you a bad person," he replied gently. "But sooner or later, you have to decide how long you'll allow fear to choose for you." His words were kind, but they carried real weight, the kind that comes from someone who had faced his own hard choices in life. Eliza nodded slowly, wiping her eyes before returning to her station. From across the lobby, Damon stood watching them. His face hardened as he pulled out his phone and made a quick call. "The guest in room 2323 is noticing too much," he said in a low voice. The words carried a clear threat, and Michael felt the tension rising. The game had just become a lot more dangerous. After a long day quietly observing the hotel, Michael decided to eat at the restaurant downstairs. The dining room looked elegant with its soft lighting and nice tables, but as soon as he stepped into the kitchen area, he saw a different story. He met Rosa Diaz, the head chef, a strong woman with kind eyes and hands that moved with practiced care even when everything around her was falling apart. Rosa was trying to run a luxury kitchen with cheap, low-quality ingredients, old broken equipment that barely worked, not enough staff, and a ventilation system that had stopped doing its job months ago. The kitchen was unbearably hot. Sweat poured down the faces of the cooks, and every now and then someone had to pause, dizzy and lightheaded, just to catch their breath. It was no way to treat people who were working so hard to feed guests. Yet through all the struggle, Rosa refused to give up her standards. She wouldn't serve food she considered dishonest or low quality. "I won't put something on a plate that I wouldn't feed my own family," she told Michael when he asked about the menu. Her voice carried both pride and exhaustion. She had been fighting this battle for a while now, stretching every dollar and every resource to keep things respectable. Watching her work, Michael felt a deep respect mixed with sadness. This woman cared so much about doing right by people, even when the system around her seemed determined to wear her down. Rosa prepared a simple chicken dish for him, using a recipe her late husband had created when he worked at the hotel years ago. As she cooked, the smells brought back warm memories for her. Every night, no matter how tough things got, she still set aside a bowl of soup from that same recipe for the employees finishing the late shift. It was her way of keeping a promise she and her husband made long ago. No one working in their kitchen would ever end their shift hungry. That small act of care had become her quiet rebellion against all the cuts and corners being forced on them. She told Michael about it while plating his food, her voice soft but steady, and it touched something deep inside him. In the middle of all this neglect, here was one person still holding on to humanity and dignity. "They can take away my budget," Rosa said, wiping her hands on her apron as she set the plate in front of him. "But I won't let them take the dignity out of my kitchen." Michael took a bite, and even in its simplicity, the food tasted honest and full of heart. He looked at Rosa with genuine appreciation. "A meal prepared with honesty is worth more than anything printed on a gold-trimmed menu," he told her. His words seemed to land gently, giving her a moment of quiet pride in the middle of another difficult night. Later, while looking through some papers in the back office area, Michael discovered old invoices. The hotel was still paying full price for premium, high-quality ingredients every month. But when he checked with Rosa, she confirmed the kitchen had never received them. The good supplies were disappearing somewhere between the orders and the plates. Someone was pocketing the difference, stealing from the kitchen, the staff, and every guest who expected real quality. Michael's hand tightened around the papers as the anger and sadness grew. This wasn't just bad management anymore. It was theft that hurt real people. People like Rosa who were still trying their best to keep promises and care for others. The fight felt more personal with every new discovery, and Michael knew he couldn't stay silent much longer. Late that night, when most of the hotel had gone quiet, except for the distant hum of the storm outside, Michael made his way down to the basement. He moved carefully through the dimly lit service corridors, the weight of everything he had seen so far pressing on his shoulders. In a forgotten storage room tucked behind old crates and dusty shelves, Marcus was waiting. The two men greeted each other with a firm handshake, the kind shared between people who knew they were up against something bigger than themselves. The air felt thick with tension and the faint smell of damp concrete. For a moment, just seeing a familiar, trusted face brought Michael a small wave of relief. Marcus spoke in a low, steady voice, but his eyes showed how much this hurt. He explained how Vernon's loyal people had been working like a quiet machine inside the hotel, blocking every real attempt to make things better. They slashed budgets without warning, turned away guests who had reservations, quietly canceled repair orders, changed numbers in reports to hide the problems, and created one service failure after another. All of it was designed so the blame would eventually fall on Michael's company, making it look like his ownership had ruined a once proud landmark. Every time a family was sent away into the rain, every time a housekeeper like Sophia worked double shifts, every time the kitchen struggled, it was part of this calculated plan. Michael listened, his chest tightening with a deep sadness. This wasn't random neglect. It was cruelty aimed straight at the heart of what he had hoped to build for his father's memory. Marcus continued, revealing the full scheme. Vernon was pulling strings through a hidden shell company, waiting patiently for the hotel's value to collapse so he could buy it back cheap. The goal was to force Michael into a corner and make him sell at a huge loss, letting Vernon walk away looking like the savior while pocketing the difference. The 1-year secrecy agreement that Michael had accepted out of respect for Vernon's pride had become the perfect shield, letting these insiders operate without suspicion. It felt like a betrayal that went beyond money. It was personal, like someone had taken Michael's promise to his late father and twisted it into a weapon. Marcus leaned forward, urgency clear in his tone. One sentence from you in that lobby, and every one of them will be on their knees. You could end this tonight. Michael sat quietly for a long moment, thinking about Zach hugging that signed basketball, about Rosa still making soup for tired workers, and about Eliza risking her job just to slip him the truth. He shook his head. I don't need them on their knees, he said, his voice calm but filled with quiet strength. I need them unable to hurt anyone here again. He wasn't looking for a fast, flashy victory. He wanted something lasting, real change that protected the good people who had stayed loyal even when things got hard. Rushing in now might let the real culprits destroy evidence and pin everything on the lower-level staff who were already struggling. The two men talked for a while longer, mapping out their next careful steps. In the end, they decided to turn room 2323 into the heart of their investigation. That same room, with its broken air conditioner and hidden problems, would now become the quiet place where they slowly gathered the truth and pieced it all together. What had been meant to represent failure and neglect would instead become the starting point for something better. As Michael left the basement and headed back upstairs, the weight on his heart felt a little lighter. He wasn't just fighting for a building anymore. He was fighting for the people inside it, for the memory of his father, and for the promise he refused to let die. The road ahead would be tough, but for the first time since arriving, Michael felt truly ready. The next day, Michael continued moving quietly through the hotel, listening more than talking. In a small maintenance office tucked away on one of the lower floors, he met Javon Taylor. Javon was a skilled worker with steady hands and a quiet way about him. He pulled out an old, worn notebook filled with page after page of careful notes. Inside were records of more than 200 rejected repair requests, Michael flipped through it slowly, his heart sinking with every entry. Damaged fire alarms that never got fixed, leaking pipes that caused constant water damage, unsafe electrical wiring hidden behind walls, and serious problems with the emergency generator. Javon had once run maintenance for a big, respected hotel downtown, where his work was valued and he had the tools and authority to do things right. Here at the Skyview Grand, he had neither the parts he needed nor the permission to make real fixes. He kept showing up anyway, doing what he could with whatever was left, because he cared about keeping people safe. Later, Michael sat down with Gloria Chen, the housekeeping supervisor who had been at the hotel for 18 long years. She was a small woman with a strong, steady presence that came from years of hard work. Gloria kept a plain cardboard box in a locked closet filled with copied schedules, old purchase records, photographs, and handwritten notes about hotel property that had quietly disappeared over time. She had collected everything carefully, documenting the wrongs she saw, but she had never gone public with it. "I was afraid," she admitted softly. "If the hotel closed because of what I said, hundreds of good people would lose their jobs and their health insurance. Some of them have families to feed, kids in school, no other place to go." Her voice trembled a little as she spoke, showing the heavy burden she had carried alone for so long. Michael listened to both of them, and something important clicked into place. The Skyview Grand wasn't falling apart because the employees were lazy or didn't care. It was still standing because people like Javon, Gloria, Sophia, Rosa, and Eliza kept showing up and giving their best, even while someone was deliberately tearing things down from the inside. The real problem wasn't a lack of loyalty from the staff. What the hotel was truly missing was someone willing to stand beside these dedicated workers and fight for them. Michael felt a deep respect and a growing ache in his chest. These weren't just employees, they were good people who had stayed loyal when it would have been easier to walk away. Gloria looked at him with tired but hopeful eyes. "We aren't trying to save a building," she said quietly. "We're trying to protect the jobs of people who have nowhere else to go." Michael met her gaze and spoke from the heart. "Then from now on, you won't be protecting it alone." His words were simple, but they carried a promise that seemed to lift some of the weight from Gloria's shoulders. For the first time in a long while, she looked like she believed things might actually change. Before Michael left, Javon pulled him aside with a serious expression. He warned that a critical part had been removed from the backup generator. If the storm outside got any worse, the whole hotel could lose power suddenly, leaving guests and staff in the dark and in real danger. Michael thanked him and walked away with a heavier step. The threats were becoming clearer and more urgent. These good people had been carrying the hotel on their backs for too long. Now, it was time for him to stand with them and start turning things around. Michael was walking through a quieter hallway the next afternoon when he spotted Zach sitting by himself near a big window, looking small and worried. The boy's old Red Bulls cap was pulled low, and he clutched his signed basketball like it gave him comfort. When Zach saw Michael, he hesitated for a second before waving him over. In a shaky voice, Zach told him what had happened. He had accidentally overheard Damon talking on the phone to someone named Vernon. The conversation sounded serious and secretive, full of plans that didn't feel right. Zach repeated what he heard as best as he could, but his hands were trembling. After spending so many months in the hospital with machines beeping and doctors looking serious, the idea of getting caught up in something scary terrified him. He didn't want to get sick again or end up back in a place filled with alarms and worry. Michael knelt down so he was eye level with the boy. He placed a gentle hand on Zach's shoulder and spoke firmly but kindly. "Listen to me, Zach. You did the right thing by telling me, but I need you to promise something. Do not follow anyone. Do not try to listen in on more conversations. Your safety matters more than any evidence. You've already fought enough battles. Let me handle the rest." Zach nodded slowly, tears welling up in his eyes. He looked relieved, but still carried that heavy fear. Michael's heart ached, seeing a kid who had already been through so much now carrying adult worries on his young shoulders. To lighten the moment, Michael sat down beside him and asked softly, "What do you want most for your birthday, Zach? Anything at all?" He expected the usual answers: courtside seats, new shoes, or signed memorabilia. But Zach didn't ask for any of those things. Instead, he looked down at his basketball and spoke with a quiet sadness. He wanted to know if there was any way his old hospital roommate, Noah, could watch a Bulls game from his bed. Noah was still stuck in the hospital, too weak to leave, and Zach felt guilty every time he smiled or enjoyed something fun. "I gotta leave," Zach said, his voice cracking, but Noah still watches the world through a hospital window. "Sometimes being happy makes me feel like I abandoned him." Michael felt a deep pull in his chest. He looked at the brave boy in front of him and spoke with warmth and wisdom. Living your life isn't a betrayal of the people who are still struggling. The way you carry them with you is what matters. You remembering Noah like this, that's love. That's strength. Zach wiped his eyes and gave a small smile, the kind that comes when someone truly understands your heart. That evening, without telling anyone, Michael made some quiet calls. He secretly arranged for the Bulls game to be streamed live right into Noah's hospital ward. Along with the game, he made sure every child receiving treatment there received a personal message of encouragement, hope, and a little extra joy on Zach's birthday. It wasn't about being a hero in the spotlight. It was about doing something kind when no one was watching. As Michael hung up the last call, he smiled to himself. In the middle of all the trouble at the hotel, moments like this reminded him why he was fighting in the first place. The storm outside grew fiercer as evening turned into night. Wind howled against the windows, and rain pounded the building like it wanted to tear everything down. Michael was in the lobby when the lights suddenly flickered once, twice, and then everything went completely black. The entire hotel lost power in an instant. Shouts and nervous voices filled the darkness. Michael's mind went straight to Javon's warning. The emergency generator should have kicked in right away, but it stayed silent. The critical part Javon had mentioned was missing. Someone had deliberately removed it. This was no accident. Panic started to spread as guests fumbled for phones and staff tried to stay calm. In the chaos, Michael learned that an elevator had stopped between floors. Inside were Zach and his parents. His heart dropped. He rushed toward the elevator bank with a flashlight, his footsteps echoing in the dark hallway. When he got closer, he could hear muffled crying. Trapped in the tight, pitch-black space, Zach was struggling to breathe. The sudden darkness and the feeling of being stuck had brought back all the terrifying memories from his hospital days. Alarms blaring, doctors rushing in, the fear of not knowing if he would be okay. Zach's breathing grew fast and shallow, turning into a full panic attack as he gasped for air. Damon appeared in the dim glow of emergency lights, barking orders. "Do not call emergency services yet," he said sharply. "We don't need the bad publicity right now. Handle it quietly." Michael stepped forward immediately, his voice strong and clear. "No. Call them now. People's lives matter more than your image." He wasn't asking for permission. Ignoring Damon's protests, Michael worked quickly with Javon and a dependable security guard named Terrell Foster. Using tools and pure determination, they managed to pry open the elevator doors just enough to create a small gap. Michael knelt down and spoke gently through the opening. "Zach, you don't have to pretend you're brave. Just listen to my voice and breathe with me. 1, 2, we're bringing you out." His tone was steady and reassuring, like a coach talking to a player in the biggest moment of the game. Zach's small voice came back, weak and scared. "Please don't leave." Michael's heart broke hearing the fear in the boy's words. "I told you I was on your team," he replied warmly. "I don't walk off the court while a teammate is still there." They kept talking Zach through it, guiding his breathing until the doors could be opened wider. When they finally got the elevator open safely, Zach practically fell into his mother's waiting arms, sobbing with relief. His parents hugged him tight, tears in their own eyes as they thanked Michael and the others over and over. The moment was raw and emotional, filled with the kind of gratitude that comes when someone shows up exactly when you need them most. A short while later, as things started to settle, Michael found the missing generator part. It had been hidden inside a box, scheduled to be taken out of the hotel with the trash. Holding the piece in his hands, the truth hit him hard. The blackout wasn't bad luck or a storm casualty. It was sabotage, plain and dangerous. Someone had been willing to put innocent lives at risk just to protect their scheme. Michael stood there in the dim emergency lighting, more determined than ever. The fight had crossed a line, and he was ready to end it. The morning after the blackout, the hotel was buzzing with nervous energy. Guests were still shaken, and staff moved around trying to restore some sense of normal. Damon Wells saw an opportunity to cover his tracks. He gathered a group of employees and guests in the lobby and loudly blamed Javon Taylor for the generator failure. "This man neglected his duties," Damon announced, his voice carrying across the space. "Because of his carelessness, our guests were put in danger." Without giving Javon a real chance to speak, Damon publicly fired him on the spot. The words echoed coldly off the marble floors. Javon stood there quietly, his face calm, but his eyes heavy with the weight of the lie. He didn't argue or shout. He simply walked back to his small maintenance room and began gathering his tools with slow, careful hands. His son's college tuition was due soon, and Javon knew that fighting back could leave a permanent black mark on his record, a false claim that he had endangered innocent people. The thought of his son hearing that story one day hurt more than losing the job itself. He had given years to this hotel, fixing problems with whatever little he had, and now he was being thrown under the bus to protect the real people responsible. But something powerful happened next. Rosa stepped forward first, then Gloria, Sophia, Eliza, Terrell, and several other longtime employees. One by one, they walked up to the front desk and placed their name badges on the counter. The small pile of badges grew, a silent but strong protest. Rosa spoke for the group, her voice steady and full of quiet fire. They announced that if Javon was fired for something management had deliberately caused, they would all resign together. For the first time, the staff was openly standing up against Damon and the unfairness they had quietly endured for too long. The lobby fell into a stunned silence. It was a moment of real courage from people who usually had no voice. Javon looked at his colleagues, his eyes glistening. "I can survive losing this job," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But don't make my son believe his father is the kind of man who placed innocent people in danger." Michael, who had been watching everything unfold, stepped forward. He looked straight at Javon with respect and conviction. "You will not carry home a lie that someone else wrote across your name," he said firmly. The words carried through the lobby, giving strength to everyone who heard them. Before Damon could react or push the firing through, Michael spoke again, this time with clear authority. He identified himself as the representative of a major shareholder in the hotel. He blocked the dismissal on the spot and made it clear that no one would be punished for management's mistakes. Damon's face changed as he realized Michael had far more power and influence than he had first thought. The manager's confident mask slipped for just a moment, replaced by surprise and unease. He now knew this guest in room 323, was someone to watch very carefully. The employees stood a little taller that morning. For the first time in a long while, they felt like someone was finally willing to stand with them instead of over them. Michael looked around at their faces and felt a renewed sense of purpose. The fight was heating up, but so was the hope. The morning of Zach's birthday brought a gentle light through the hotel windows, a welcome calm after the stormy night. Michael found the boy sitting in the lobby with his family, still wearing his favorite old Red Bulls cap. Zach's eyes lit up when he saw Michael, but there was also a quiet thoughtfulness about him. A package had just arrived from the hospital. Inside was a video message from Noah and the other children in the ward. When Zach played it, the screen filled with smiling kids, all wearing red caps just like his. They laughed and waved, thanking Zach for remembering them and for thinking about Noah during his special day. Their joy was real and heartfelt, the kind that comes from kids who don't have much but still find ways to support each other. Tucked inside the package was also a handwritten note from Noah. The words were simple but powerful. When you meet your hero, ask him whether heroes ever get scared. Zach read it out loud, then looked up at Michael with big, curious eyes. The question hung in the air between them, honest and innocent. It wasn't the kind of thing most people dared to ask a man like Michael Jordan, but coming from Zach, it felt important. Michael sat down beside him on the couch, the weight of the past few days showing in his face. He thought for a moment before answering truthfully. Yes, he admitted. He was afraid. He was scared he might fail to save this hotel that carried so many memories of his father. He worried that the good employees who had started trusting him, people like Javon, Rosa, Gloria, and Sophia, would end up suffering more because of his choices. Most of all, he feared that the promise he made to his dad all those years ago would stay unfinished, just another broken dream. There are nights when I want to turn away so I won't have to watch myself fail, Michael said quietly, his voice honest and vulnerable in a way few people ever heard. Zach listened carefully, then asked in a small voice, "Then what makes you stay?" Michael smiled softly, thinking about his father's steady belief in him. "Because someone once believed I would never quit, even though he is no longer here to see whether he was right." The words carried deep love and quiet strength. Courage, he explained to Zach, wasn't about never feeling afraid. It was about choosing to do what was right even when fear was sitting right there beside you. Zach nodded slowly, letting the idea sink in. For a boy who had faced so many medical battles, the message meant everything. Before they stood up, Zach reached into his red cap and pulled out Noah's handwritten letter. He folded it carefully and handed it to Michael. "Then today," Zach said with surprising steadiness, "you stay for your father. I'll stay for Noah." Michael took the note, feeling the simple power of those words. In that moment, the bond between the man and the boy felt stronger than ever. Amid all the secrets and struggles inside the hotel, this friendship was becoming one of the brightest lights guiding the way forward. Michael slipped the letter into his pocket like a new promise, ready to keep moving ahead. Later that day, tension filled the air when Vernon Pike arrived at the Skyview Grand with a small group of wealthy investors. He walked through the lobby like he still owned the place, dressed sharply and speaking with smooth confidence. Vernon presented the hotel as a troubled property that had fallen on hard times, something his company could buy at a low price and rescue with fresh vision. Damon had prepared carefully for the visit. He had fixed up a few showrooms to look perfect, locked off the worst areas, and moved any obvious evidence of neglect out of sight. It was all a carefully built illusion, meant to hide the truth Michael had been uncovering day by day. Vernon froze for a moment when he spotted Michael sitting calmly in the lobby, watching everything unfold. The two men hadn't seen each other in years, and the history between them ran deep and painful. Vernon had once been an older player on Michael's high school team. He had always believed Michael took the future, the spotlight, and the success that should have been his. Now, seeing Michael here in the hotel he once controlled brought all that old resentment rushing back. They exchanged polite words on the surface, but underneath every sentence was sharp, hidden hostility. Vernon didn't know how much Michael had already discovered. Michael, in turn, kept his cards close, never revealing the evidence, the conversations with the staff, or the depth of the sabotage he had uncovered. "Chicago is a small city," Vernon said with a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Everywhere I go, I meet someone who enjoys turning another man's failure into his own victory." Michael looked at him steadily, his voice calm but carrying real weight. Failure isn't shameful. Pushing other people down so you can stand above them is. The words landed heavily between them. In that moment, Michael wasn't just speaking about business. He was thinking about the employees who had been hurt, the families turned away, and the memory of his father that Vernon's actions had disrespected. There was real pain behind Vernon's resentment, but Michael refused to accept it as an excuse for the harm being done to innocent people. The investors watched the exchange with interest, sensing there was more to the story than they had been told. Before Vernon could steer the conversation away or move the group along, Michael stood up. He asked politely if he could join the investor tour as a paying guest who had a great deal to say about the property. The investors, curious and impressed by his confidence, agreed right away. Vernon's face tightened, but it was too late to refuse without looking bad in front of the group. As the tour began to move forward, Michael walked with quiet purpose. He knew this was a critical moment. The man who had once tried to trap him was now forced to face him in the very building where so many promises and so much pain were colliding. Michael felt the weight of everything, his father's memory, the loyal employees, and the future of this place, resting on what happened next. He was ready. The investor tour moved through the hotel with Vernon leading the way, his voice smooth as he pointed out features. He stopped at a beautifully renovated suite on one of the upper floors. The room looked perfect: fresh paint, new furniture, working air conditioning, and a stunning view of the city. Vernon smiled confidently, telling the group how his team could restore the entire property to this standard once they took over. The investors nodded, clearly impressed by the polished presentation. It was exactly the kind of illusion Damon had worked hard to create for moments like this. Michael had stayed quiet up to that point, but now he stepped forward. In a calm, clear voice, he revealed the truth. "This room is never offered to ordinary guests," he said. "It's kept looking perfect just for inspections, investors, and publicity photos." The words landed like a quiet thunderclap. The investors exchanged surprised glances. Vernon's smile faltered for a second as Michael continued, exposing how the hotel showed one face to important visitors and a very different one to regular families who saved up for a special stay. Then Michael led the entire group to room 2323. He opened the door and let them see the reality for themselves. The mold on the walls, the broken air conditioner that left the room stuffy and damp, the television that barely worked, and the window that looked out on nothing but a stained brick wall instead of the beautiful skyline promised online. He showed them the rejected repair records and explained how this room had been deliberately kept off the market. The investors' expressions changed as they took it all in. But Michael didn't stop at the physical damage. He spoke about the people behind the problems, the human cost that mattered most. He told them about Sophia working multiple exhausting shifts because staff had been cut. He described Javan trying to fix dangerous equipment without the right parts. He spoke of Rosa fighting to serve honest meals with supplies that never arrived. And he mentioned Eliza, forced to turn away families even when rooms were available, all because of fear and secret orders. His voice stayed steady, but the emotion behind it was clear. These weren't just numbers on a balance sheet. They were real lives being quietly hurt. "A hotel doesn't die when the paint begins to peel," Michael said, looking each investor in the eye. "It dies when the people inside stop believing their voices matter." One of the investors, Vanessa Hughes, turned to him with a serious expression. "Who ordered this room to remain in this condition?" Michael's answer was direct and powerful. "The person hoping you would notice the damage but never ask who created it." The room grew quiet. The contrast between the beautiful display suite and the neglected reality of room 2323 was impossible to ignore now. Vernon stood off to the side, his face tight with anger and unease. Before anyone could say more, Damon's phone buzzed in his pocket. He read the message quickly, his face going pale. Gloria had managed to get copies of important documents from his office. The evidence was slipping beyond his control, and the walls were closing in faster than he had expected. The tour that was supposed to be a clean victory was turning into something much more dangerous for Vernon and his plans. The tension that had been building finally broke later that day. Damon caught Gloria in a back hallway, carrying a bag filled with copied documents from his office, his face twisted with panic and anger as he realized what she had. Without hesitation, he tore the bag from her hands and bolted toward the service stairs. His plan was clear: get to the hotel's waste furnace and destroy everything before the truth could come out. Gloria called out after him, but her voice was lost in the echo of his running footsteps. Sophia, who was working nearby, didn't hesitate. With a quick, brave move, she reached over and triggered a safety alarm. Loud sirens blared through the corridor, and heavy fire doors began closing automatically throughout the building. Damon was suddenly trapped between two sections, cut off from his escape route. He slammed against one of the doors in frustration, breathing hard and looking for another way out. The once confident manager now looked desperate, cornered by the very people he had looked down on for so long. From a distance, young Zach saw what was happening. His heart raced as he watched Damon searching frantically for another path. For a moment, the boy wanted to run after him, to help stop the bad guy like in the movies. But he remembered Michael's words clearly. Instead of chasing danger, Zach turned and ran the other way to find Terrell and his parents. His small act showed real growth. He had learned the difference between courage and recklessness. Protecting the people he cared about didn't always mean running toward trouble. Sometimes it meant making the smart, safe choice. Damon, still trapped, shouted through the gap in the doors at Sophia and the others who had gathered. "Do you honestly believe Jordan will remember any of you after this is over?" His voice was mocking, trying to plant doubt in their hearts. Sophia stood tall, even though her hands were shaking. She looked him in the eye and answered with quiet strength. "Maybe he won't. But my daughter will remember that her mother finally stopped bowing her head." Her words carried years of quiet dignity and newfound courage. They moved everyone who heard them. In that hallway, the employees stood together, no longer willing to stay silent. Before Damon could find another way to the furnace, Terrell caught up to him. With steady determination, the security guard stopped him and recovered the stolen documents. When they went through the files later, the proof was overwhelming. Maintenance funds, food budgets, and even parts of employee wages had been secretly redirected into businesses controlled by Vernon. The evidence was clear and damning. The sabotage wasn't just about damaging a hotel anymore. It was theft that had hurt real people in real ways. As the documents were secured, a new sense of justice began to settle over the Skyview Grand. The truth was finally coming into the light. The grand lobby of the Skyview Grand was packed with people. Employees, curious guests, the investors from earlier, and now police officers who had arrived after the evidence was recovered. The air felt thick with anticipation. Michael stood at the center of it all, calm but resolute. In a clear, steady voice that carried through the entire space, he finally revealed the truth. He was the true owner of the hotel. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Then, without drama or boasting, he began laying out the evidence one piece at a time. Deliberate budget cuts that starved the kitchen and maintenance, stolen property, falsified occupancy reports that turned away families, manufactured service failures, and the cold plan to force him to sell the hotel back at a fraction of its value. As he spoke, the weight of everything that had been hidden finally came into the light. People stood in stunned silence, realizing how much had been going on behind the scenes. Michael didn't stop there. He turned to the people who mattered most and called them forward. Eliza, Sophia, Gloria, Rosa, Javon, Terrell, please come stand with me. One by one, the employees who had been invisible for so long stepped up beside him. Instead of claiming the victory as his own, Michael stepped back slightly and gave them the floor. He asked each of them to share what they had truly endured. It was their moment to be heard. Eliza was the first to speak, and her voice broke almost immediately. Tears streamed down her face as she admitted how she had turned away families even when rooms were available. She had followed the secret "do not sell" orders out of fear fear of losing her job and being unable to pay for her mother's expensive medical treatments. "I kept telling myself I was only following policy," she said, her voice shaking with raw emotion. "But every family I sent back into the cold was still a choice I made." The lobby was completely quiet, except for the sound of her quiet sobs. Many people, including some guests, had tears in their eyes too. Sophia spoke next, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She talked about working double shifts for months, missing her daughter's school events, and still being treated as if she were invisible unless something went wrong. "I love this job because I get to make rooms feel like home for people," she said softly. "But lately, it's felt like I was just cleaning up someone else's mess while my own family waited for me at home." Gloria, with her 18 years of service, shared how she had quietly documented everything in her box, losing sleep at night, worrying about whether speaking up would cause the hotel to close and leave hundreds of families without income. "I stayed silent for too long," she admitted, "because I thought protecting jobs meant protecting the wrong people." Rosa wiped her eyes as she described the pain of watching good ingredients disappear while she tried to create honest meals with cheap substitutes. "My late husband and I promised no one would leave our kitchen hungry. I've been breaking that promise every night just to keep the doors open." Javon spoke with quiet dignity about the dangerous conditions he tried to fix with limited tools, thinking every day about the guests who trusted the hotel to keep them safe. Terrell added how he had seen security footage of things being moved at night, but felt powerless to act without risking his own position. Michael listened to each story with deep respect, then spoke to Eliza again, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "A mistake does not have to become the final sentence of your story," he told her warmly. "It only becomes final when you refuse to correct it." His words offered grace and hope, not judgment, and they seemed to lift some of the heavy burden each of them had been carrying alone. The other employees' stories touched everyone in the lobby. By the time they finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. The invisible workers were finally seen, and their dignity was restored in front of everyone. Vernon stood off to the side, his face pale and defeated. Unable to deny the mountain of evidence against him, he asked Michael for one private conversation before the police took him away. Michael looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right," he said quietly. He agreed not out of weakness, but because some conversations needed to happen away from the crowd. The lobby watched as the two men stepped aside, the weight of years of rivalry and pain hanging between them. The long battle for the Skyview Grand was reaching its end, but new beginnings were just starting to take shape. In a quiet office away from the crowded lobby, Michael sat down across from Vernon Pike. The room felt heavy with years of unspoken pain. For the first time, Vernon let his guard down. His voice was low and rough as he told his story. The Skyview Grand had been built by his uncle, Thomas Pike, the man who raised him after his parents were gone. Basketball had been Vernon's dream when he was young, but a bad injury ended it all too soon. After that, the hotel became the one thing that still made him feel important and proud. When the business started struggling, Vernon felt like he was losing the last piece of proof that his life had mattered. He looked at Michael with tired eyes and admitted the truth behind his resentment. He had convinced himself that Michael's life was full of effortless wins, while his own path had been nothing but loss and disappointment. Michael listened without interrupting. When Vernon finished, Michael shared some truths he had never told him before. He spoke about all the times he had been rejected, about practicing until his hands bled and his body ached, about living under constant pressure and expectations that never let up. Most painfully, he talked about losing his father and how that loss still lived in his heart every single day. "Life wasn't easy for me either, Vernon," Michael said gently. He didn't dismiss Vernon's pain or pretend it didn't matter. He understood what it felt like to carry deep wounds. but he refused to accept pain as an excuse for hurting so many innocent people, the employees who had done nothing wrong but still suffered because of their scheme. The conversation grew quiet for a moment. Then Vernon spoke with a voice full of regret. "I only wanted to step out of your shadow once." Michael shook his head slowly, his words kind but honest. "You were never living in my shadow, Vernon. You were living inside a room, your resentment locked from the inside." Vernon looked down, the weight of those words hitting him hard. After a long pause, he asked softly, "You're still going to keep my family's name in this building?" Michael nodded. "I will preserve what your uncle built, but I will not protect what you tried to destroy." His decision was firm. The Pike family would not be erased from the hotel's history. A permanent exhibition would honor Vernon's uncle, Thomas Pike, as the founder of the Sky View Grand. But Vernon would still have to face the consequences of his crimes. History could remember the good without hiding the bad that came later. As the police prepared to take Vernon away, he stood up and looked back at Michael one last time. Then he turned toward the lobby and took one final look at the hotel. For the first time in years, there was no anger on his face. There was only a deep, quiet emptiness, the look of a man who suddenly realized how many years he had sacrificed to resentment. He walked out with the officers, shoulders heavy, leaving behind the place that had once meant everything to him. Michael watched him go, feeling a complicated mix of sadness and closure. Some wounds took a lifetime to understand, but today, at least, the truth had finally been spoken. 6 months later, the Skyview Grand celebrated its grand reopening on a bright, sunny afternoon. The lobby was filled with laughter, fresh flowers, and the warm energy of people who had worked hard to bring the hotel back to life. Strings of lights twinkled overhead, and a gentle buzz of excitement filled the air. The transformation was real and beautiful, not just in the freshly painted walls and repaired rooms, but in the spirit of the place itself. Javon Taylor now served as Director of Engineering and Maintenance. He walked the floors with pride, knowing every system was running safely because he finally had the team and resources he needed. Rosa Diaz proudly led the restored restaurant, where honest, delicious meals were prepared with care and served with warmth. Gloria Chen oversaw service quality across the entire hotel, making sure every guest felt truly seen and respected. Sophia received better pay, reasonable working hours, and a well-deserved promotion. She smiled more often now, no longer exhausted to the point of tears. Eliza had become the new guest relations manager. She used her own painful experiences to train the staff, making sure no frightened employee or struggling family was ever ignored or turned away again. On one of the upper floors that had once stood empty, Michael had created something especially meaningful: free temporary housing for families whose children were receiving long-term medical treatment at a nearby hospital. Parents could stay close to their kids without worrying about the cost of a room during the hardest times of their lives. Room 2323 was not turned into a fancy celebrity suite. Instead, Michael transformed it with love and purpose into the Promise Room. Families who could not afford a place to stay while their children received medical care could now stay there free of charge. The walls were covered with meaningful photographs, images of James Jordan smiling proudly, Thomas Pike as the hotel's founder, and all the dedicated employees who had helped save the Skyview Grand. It had become a room full of hope, history, and quiet strength. On a special afternoon, Zach returned to the hotel hand in hand with Noah. Noah was finally strong enough to leave the hospital for the first time in a long while. Both boys wore their red caps and carried the same excitement in their eyes. Michael greeted them warmly and placed the very first symbolic key to the Promise Room into their hands. The hotel had also launched a community basketball program for children recovering from serious illness, giving kids like Zach and Noah a place to play, dream, and feel strong again. Zach looked around the beautiful room, then up at Michael with wonder. "I thought you were the one who saved the hotel." Michael smiled gently and shook his head. "No, the people who refused to stop caring saved it." Noah, still holding the key tightly, asked in a soft voice, "Then who does this room belong to?" Michael placed a hand on each boy's shoulder and answered with deep warmth, "It belongs to anyone who needs to remember that there is still a team standing behind them." Later, as the celebration continued, Michael stood alone for a moment by the window in the promise room. He looked out at the Chicago skyline and thought about his father. Years ago, James Jordan had saved money for months just to spend one peaceful night in this very hotel. Now the same building was opening its doors wide to people who could not afford even a single night of comfort. A quiet smile crossed Michael's face as he felt his father's presence in his heart. The promise had finally been kept, not through perfection, but through love, courage, and the simple decision to stand by others when it mattered most. The Skyview Grand was no longer just a landmark. It had become a place of second chances, healing, and hope, for guests, for employees, and for families who needed it the most. And in that moment, everything felt exactly right.